Hello, and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for the talks this evening. But before we jump into those, I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall, or more accurately in most companies, water scrumfall, to using truly autonomous empowered teams. Now, the reason why that's our mission is because when you're in a high change environment, it's a more effective, a more efficient, and a more sustainable way of working. So what do I mean by that? If you're in a low change environment, projects make sense. Build a team, they build something over here, disband the team, move them somewhere else. But in a lot of companies I've worked in recently, there's literally hundreds of projects going on at any given time. So it doesn't make sense to keep moving people around and having to learn and unlearn things as they go. So it's better to have a team that's dedicated to one section of the product. They can really understand the customers, really understand the business needs, and then iterate to make sure that they're getting the best product that meets both. Now, that's really easy to say, not so easy to put into practice. And that's where these talks come in. So no talk is going to cover the entire end-to-end process because that's just too high level and we wouldn't get any value out of it. So we invite people to share how they're changing their part of the process and how they're improving their ways of working. Now, hopefully you can learn something from that. And that's the whole point of this. So if you're kind of thinking about how you might apply this in your context, then please do ask questions of the speakers. So that's what they're here for, and they're really excited to answer your questions. Now, sometimes we can't get through all the questions, and that's where the UXDX community Slack group comes in. So any questions we don't have time, we'll post those questions into the Ask the Speakers channel, and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer those questions for you. But that's enough about me. You're not here to listen to me talking, so I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. Dean Schuster, who's a partner at Truematter. He'll be speaking about digital product access, the user experience problem of our time. So I'd like to welcome Dean to the stage. Hello, Dean.
Hello, hello. It's nice to see you. Thank you. I'm going to just dive right on in. First, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to speak to the group. And I hope this talk will be of at least interest, if not controversy. We'll see. You can find me at Experience Dean on Twitter as well as Instagram. And indeed, I am a founder and partner of a UX firm here in the United States called Truematter. All UX all the time, and we specialize in high complexity digital products. So a lot of give and take with serious development and process. Okay, today, our topic, digital product access, what I'm calling the user experience problem of our time. And I really do mean that. But first, a story. Now, when I do this talk, I often ask how many people in the audience are with technical support. And I don't get that many hands raised, typically. I'm typically not speaking to technical support folks. But when I shift the question to how many of you provide technical support for your families or your loved ones, well, then nearly every hand goes up because that's what we do for our families. You know, we're always the people who understand all this stuff and the people to whom our loved ones come for help. So this is my mom. Now, she's wonderful, very smart. She does accounting and taxes for a living. But for my mom, digital product access, that means signing up, logging in, recovering passwords, things of this nature. This is a real barrier for her. So a typical phone call with my mom goes a bit like this, and you might find this familiar. My mom will call me, and I'll say, "Hello, Mom," and she'll go right past hello and right straight through, "My Facebook doesn't come up." So I'll say, "Well, what do you mean your Facebook doesn't come up?" "Well, it doesn't come up." I was like, "Well, what are you looking at right now?" And my mom will say, "The living room wall." Okay. All right, Mom, how about you go in front of your computer? Is that where you typically are accessing Facebook? Yes. Go to your computer. All right, what are you looking at now? My computer. And of course, I know that this call is going to take some time, right? Now, my mom is a novice user, but as we'll see in a minute, just because she's a novice doesn't mean she's alone. These are the things that my mom has trouble with when it comes to digital products of all sorts. Now, I've mentioned Facebook, but when I talk to my mom or my aunt or my other aunt, the problems usually revolve around access. And I found this has been true for years and years and years. The problems are almost always around access, not necessarily what we'll call real world use. So my mom has trouble signing up, logging in, staying logged in, recognizing when she's logged out. That's a big one. Retrieving passwords, regaining access, and storing credentials. That's pretty much everything with respect to access. And that's a problem. If you've got a problem with any one of these things, just typical day-to-day interaction with products is going to be an issue. So I've had to learn the hard way how to patiently unpack this problem for her. She has trouble with all of it, every single aspect. Now, my mom is not alone. And remember, my mom's a very smart person, highly educated, all of this, right? Sure, she's 77, but I've dealt with folks who are 90 who are pretty dang good at using digital products. So age is not necessarily an issue because I've dealt with young people who have serious trouble with digital product access as well. But the thing is, most people struggle with access. Novice users, intermediate users, power users, even expert trained users. There's problems associated with this. And what I want to do today is to convince you of the depth of the problem. That's what we're after today. Most product teams, and I will argue development heavy teams, have a problem accepting this reality for what it is. And so I really want to take this to the nth degree today, because my company has been in business for over 20 years, and we learned the problem of access very, very early on. And as I look back on it now, it seems very clear. And let's go back to a project that we did way back when. It's called knowyourdoc.com. And this was 1997. Not kidding. I'm willing to bet that some people listening today weren't born when I had this problem. That dates me a little bit, but it also tells us that the problem is not new. The problem is old. All right, so here is this wonderful Know Your Doc screen that we made. It's as big as I can make it. This is an old product, right? You didn't even actually have to log into this thing, but there was still a barrier. Now, first, let me offer you a quick critique here for fun. This is an old product, as you can see by the mountain of text we expected you to read in order to do anything, by the ludicrous chart and graph that bends at a 90-degree angle. I wonder what person thought of that. And this area where we're trying to hone down our results, and there's a zillion go buttons, and there's a start over button, and there's a learn more button, all this stuff. There's a lot going on, and it's rudimentary. But the real problem, when we did a bunch of user testing on this, and we did user testing as we were creating the product all the way through building it. And this is what we learned. In order to use this product, you simply had to do a couple of simple things. You had to choose a zip code in the United States, sort of a postal code, and a city, state. And then you could choose a physician specialty and go ahead and click go, and you're going to get a certain number of physicians that you can match yourself to. That's basically the idea of it. Now, that seems pretty simple. You're not even logging in. You don't even have to present credentials. You don't have to present a username and password, anything like that. But we found access to be difficult for people. They had lots and lots of problem in our user testing on the simple upfront stuff. And that was a little either or, choose specialty and go. In other words, before they had to do anything, before they could get into the app, before they could access all the wonderful things we made, they had trouble. And all of the usability problems we found early on were just getting them in. In fact, once they got in, the usability problems dropped, which means even that really ridiculous graph you just looked at was fairly usable, and people had very little trouble. They had trouble with access. And we started seeing this problem in all the user tests we did. And we have done a ton of user testing over the course of our company's existence, and certainly over the course of my career. And this keeps coming up. So the question I have for us today that I want to explore and I want to impress on you and really sear into you is, why is this such an issue? Why is it so hard for people to get into products? All right, first, access lives in this weird space between usability and security. Right? The more usable you want something, you want to remove barriers to getting into something and to using it, right? But if you want something to be secure, you must add barriers, and we must have security, right? But barriers cause what we say in business circles these days, friction. And it really is a catch-22, which means it's a problem that's circular and is very difficult to solve. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So let's say your product is hard to use or maybe hard to access, or getting in is difficult. So you reduce access barriers to make it easier for people to get in. Of course, that causes problems with security, right? And of course, that means you have to add these security barriers, which of course in turn make access more difficult, make things harder to use. The very act of solving one problem creates the other problem, and vice versa, sort of in an endless loop. That's a catch-22, very difficult problem we still live with today. Now, access itself frustrates people, and I cannot emphasize this enough. It perplexes them, and it gets them even angry. All right, let's start with sign up. And everything I'm about to show you is an existing product today. This is not some old product that no one uses anymore. It's really in use today. Now, people in America will know what this is right away. This is the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's something that all adults who have children entering college, they fill this out, and this helps calculate the type of aid they'll have based on income and things like this. So it's just something everyone has to do, and it's a chore. It's a horrible pain and a chore. I'm going to show you a few screens. This is all sign up. You have to sign up for yourself. You have to sign up for your child, each different child. There are PIN numbers. There are secret codes. There's two-factor authentication at many stages of the process. There are stages of this process that have stages of processes within them. All of the different types of questions asked deal with data that you may not have on hand. They deal with financial data. They deal with sensitive identity data, all of these things. It takes forever to sign up. It's very hard. You almost always can't do it all at once. I can't even understand how people do this half the time, since I am a professional and really just want to tear my hair out when trying to do it. So again, if I speak and I'm in America and I say the word FAFSA, and there's people my age, with college age young people, you can see their face that they understand without even having to look at all of these screens. Sign up is difficult. Now, this is a relatively complex product, but the sign up is overwrought, highly difficult. And here's the thing. It's meant for everyone to use, from the novice user through the power user. This does not appear to be a system whose access area is okay for novices, right? As I'm sort of cycling through this, you can probably imagine how wonderful it must be to do. Now, it's highly complex. There's multiple systems. There's document uploads. The steps are unclear. Help is mixed in. Instructions are mixed in. There's really bad error messaging. And again, novices have to use it. And that just means they get angry. Very, very angry. In fact, this digital image was created by my team when they heard me getting angry at things like this and were sort of like losing it. And they made this for me. Okay, so let's move on to another thing. Here in the state of South Carolina, where I live in the United States, if you want to plant some kind of wonderful shrub in your yard, you want to be careful not to dig in a place where you're going to hit a pipe or a wire or something like this. So you can dial this phone number 811, and a whole bunch of people will come out from different agencies, and they'll paint all over your lawn where you should not dig and plant a shrub, right? So I think, do I really need to call this number? Why can't I just go to some site and log in? And I can, of course. And here it is. This is really in place right now, and this is just the sign up. It would have taken me mere minutes, if that, to make a phone call. But I'm a glutton for punishment, of course. So I attempted to do it this way and was faced with a great deal of time and frustration and setting up credentials and trying to sign in, and look at that lovely error handling. Wow. Some of the problems that are very obvious here. This is designed by developers. Sorry. Lots of wonderful developers on my team. I am one myself. This is not accessible. It has horrible error handling, confusing layout, odd button placement, poor design, terrible content, you name it. It's all there. It's today. It's not something that is meant for people who are working in the 90s. It's today. And so we get angry. We find it difficult to use. I'm a professional, so I made it all the way through, but boy, I didn't like it. Now, another thing in America we have is the dreaded Internal Revenue Service. And you can create an account with them. And of course, admittedly, this is sensitive stuff. This has to do with personal information. And it's the government, and we want to be careful. But you can, in fact, set up the ability to pay your taxes through this portal. Fine and dandy. It's a very long setup process. I'm not even going to go through that part of it, although it was terrible. But you go through this terribly long, involved setup process only to arrive at this wonderful screen after you think you're done. Activation needed. Now, this might be small on your screen, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see exactly what it is they're saying. First, once you're done, you need an activation code sent to your address of record via US mail. I have people who work for me who I don't know that they even know how to mail a letter, let alone find out where to get a stamp. You need the activation code to complete the registration process and access the application. Great developer speak there. The letter should arrive in 5 to 10 business days, or 2 weeks, who can say? And it explains how to activate your IRS user profile. If you don't receive the letter within 15 days, log in with your username and password to request that we resend a new activation code. Now, of course, I did this. I forgot. I waited 16 days. Too late, Dean. And I had to do this again. And you can imagine how happy I was, because I had to wait again to receive that activation code by mail in another 5 to 10 business days. I just want to log in. And again, these are problems that, as a professional in the business, I am having. I cannot imagine other people using it who have trouble with technology. I certainly can't imagine my mom doing this, because this is delayed gratification. This is all the responsibility put on me. I got to remember things. They're not communicating what's going to happen well. There's a vague process. I'm not prepared for the fact that I'm going to have to do this. And it's way, way harder than finding in my closet a paper check and figuring out how to send it to a place with an actual stamp and a letter. It's way harder than that. And this is modernity. We should be making things easier. And of course, we get angry. Now, access should be easy. Login should be easy, right? We have patterns for this, don't we? We do it every day. We develop it all the time. It's the most common thing we do. Think about changing your password with Microsoft, which is a whole lot of fun if you've ever done that, and especially if you're a Mac user, right? If you're a Mac user and suddenly, this is how you learn that you have to change your password. Suddenly something just doesn't work. And you have to start investigating why, and you realize, wait. Maybe I'm being prompted to access my password. So I try to log in online, and sure enough, I've got to go ahead and change and re-authenticate with Microsoft, as is my wont every few months, but I have to change it on my phone, my desktop app, my web, Teams this, Teams mobile, Teams recordings, all of it, every time, two-factor every time. Not that I can't handle it, not that I don't have the two-factor app, but man, it's pretty rough, right? And this is partially why I call access the user experience problem over time. It's the thing that frustrates us the most, the things that takes time, the things that we have to do that causes problems when we're in a hurry and need to get work done. All of these problems with Microsoft are simple, even though they're kind of doing the things they need to do for security purposes. It doesn't mean the experience is right. All of these things are true about that process. And these processes are not abnormal processes, but they do get us angry, deeply frustrated with technology. They're ravaging our experience. Now, other problems we have, and they're big ones, okay? Technology and security, evolving very slowly, way more slowly than we would like. You think certain devices have done really well in helping us get access and helping making the access problem simpler. Our phones are a great example of this. We had certain number of digit codes. Now they're usually 6-digit codes. We can handle that. We understand what a PIN is and things like that. And even my mom understands this. So that's good. That's progress. We've moved to Touch ID. Okay, it's not perfectly secure, but it's got the feeling of ease to it, and it helps us use our phones. It helps us use a tablet. Face ID, another thing. Again, also not perfect. I know this has been faked. Yes. But it helps things become easier. And then depending on what app ecosystem you use, you get other types of ease that comes along with it. However, as much as we've done well with phones, and even there's some biometrics on laptops and things like that, as much advancement as we've made on some devices, in other areas we're still lagging behind, and we're still doing passwords and usernames and retrieval and authentication, and we have to manage them, and it's not all easy. Bits of it are. And I would even argue that phones, they've been around forever. Smartphones have been around for a long time now, and we're still solving this problem. So I get the feeling that we're going to be solving this access problem the rest of my career, at the very least, which means it's the problem of our time. All these things are not easy today. They're really not easy. Digital tools and passwords, totally out of control, right? The average person has 100 passwords, right? This is a recent study in 2021. I don't know. I stopped counting as I started approaching 400. I'm sure I've got more. I was like, okay, this is a lot. This blows it away. Conservative estimate. This is just a quick look at the folds, some of the folders in my password manager. So this is why people end up not using these things and having bad passwords and faulty security, because their experience of dealing with so many things is so bad and so problematic. We definitely get this all the time. We see this all the time, by the way, with users. They really are using these passwords still, only when they're required not to. They're barely getting to that. And don't get me started about how hard it is for people to understand password requirements. Spoiler alert, very hard for people. And innovation has not always made things easier. And that's the real frustrating thing for me. TV, when I was a kid, all right? I'm not that old, right? I'm 50. But when I was a kid, TV was easy, okay? You just turned on the TV. Sure, you had 3 channels and you had to get up and go turn a dial. That's fine. But as soon as you turned a dial, your show was on. You just looked at a little script that said what show was on when. That's pretty easy. As TV evolved, it became more feature-rich and more amazing, but way harder to use. And we're now working in this area of reducing complexity of things like remotes, and we're doing a little bit better at it, but not much. We get to streaming television, and you have all of the problems of credentials and passwords and retrieval and two-factor and setup and sign in, and you still have remotes. TV is really hard to watch today compared to what it used to be. We're in an explosion, a golden age of content, but it's way harder to do than it was, right? And so we still have to deal with all of this stuff. Credential recovery, brutal. It's so hard for users. They have a hard time with this. I cannot emphasize this enough. They truly hate this and complain about it an awful lot. It's just a fact of life. It is a fact of security, but it's an issue. Imagine what I had to do to even explain two-factor authentication to my mom, who's, again, a very smart person. I simply had to explain it and say, what if you have a key to your house, and you turn the lock, but you can't get in until you call me, and I have to show up with the real key and let you in every time, unless somehow you ask the house to remember you. I don't know. But she got it after that and just looked at me like I was an idiot. And I can't really blame her. And of course, there's terrible consistency with implementing two-factor across the board, across products. It's no wonder people have difficulty with this, big time, right? Okay. It's just basically a series of difficult experiences, even with the best two-factor. It really is. In fact, the first time my mom used two-factor, she had to stop everything and call me because she was concerned it was a scam, and she'd been so trained to be careful about scams. Two-factor itself felt like one to her, and we had to talk her through that and say, well, this is one of those exceptions, and that was actually a difficult thing to sort out. Again, we're upset, we're frustrated, we're flummoxed, we're angry. It's an experience-crushing thing. And remember, we haven't even done anything yet. We're just trying to get in. And I'm going to argue that single sign-on and big companies, things are not a lot better, okay? Your problems are different, and your problems of access have a different type of scale to them. When we have to define a digital product, this is what we talk about the most. We talk about security, authentication, roles, permissions, single sign-on, edge cases, admin, everything having to do with getting in and understanding who you are and starting to work. That's what we spend all of our time on. That's all access. It's all access, right? When people at big companies have problems, they got to do this stuff. Help desk, support tickets, workarounds, access requests. Sound like fun to you? If you're in big companies, you know this is not fun at all. Another problem is that dev teams aren't focusing on access experience. And I mean dev-centric teams, right? There's plenty of dev teams that have lots of great, UX folks and BAs and content strategists and things like that help. But dev-centric teams with only developers have a real hard time with this. And the main problem is that they feel it's already solved, particularly login or credential recovery. We solve this. We have patterns for this. Let's get to the real work. Let's push our patterns out to people and get to the real stuff we want to do. And that's a dangerous way to think about digital products when the problem is this deep. Okay, access is a problem for everyone. It's a problem for novices, intermediates, power users, and experts, trained people. This is a problem for everyone. We've seen it again and again and again. We haven't yet stopped seeing it. And that's what I'm trying to impress on you today. So, is it bleak? Yes, it is bleak from an experience perspective. It's simply important, desperately important that we know this. And that's what this talk is about today. I want you to never forget how difficult access is for people. And it's going to be a problem for a very, very long time. Remember, things are moving slowly. The public and everyone is able to accept and use less than what we know we can do. And it's going to be that way for a while. So that means we've got to be thinking about it all the time, even when we assume we already have the answer, especially if. I want you to recognize this as a problem. I want you to deeply understand it, and I want you to internalize it. It is incredibly important for your work, because if people have this much trouble just getting into the stuff you're making, you've got to pay lots and lots of attention to those entry points, those access points, those re-entry points. Now, you can do something about this, of course, but that is an entirely different talk where we talk about how you take this realization and move forward with it. And I hope at some point, perhaps I'll get to give you this talk. But for now, it's a victory if you deeply internalize the depth of the problem, because then you can think differently about acting. And a lot of solutions are not that difficult when you think that way. All right, so that's another talk. I do have some further reading though. So we've done a little writing about this, the user experience problem of our time, over at our blog at Truematter. This is not sales stuff. This is just for you. I hope it helps you. And a little spoiler on some of the things you can do, which is tackling the maddening problem of digital product access. If you just go to truematter.com, you find our blog, and you'll find these really easily. But if you're interested, read them. They'll help you, and they'll set you on your way. But for my purposes, in this particular talk, that said, again, my name is Dean, and I really appreciate your attention as I've really laid out the bleak story of digital product access. But thank you very much. And I am going to go ahead and stop sharing. Thank you.
I'll just take that off there. So yeah, thanks for sharing. I actually had a question. We've run slightly over time, but I'm
sorry.
Slack group.
Please
because
do.
My question is, when should you start investing in your access? Because there's no point having the best access if you have no features after the access.
Oh yeah, 100% true. Yeah, and for me, it's something you have to think about early on, obviously, right away. If you end up just assuming you're going to do everything through Okta, for instance, it's an early assumption. You've got to think about it fast, because this is the thing we don't think about. That's all. But I'll go to the Slack channel, and I appreciate. I'm sorry, I'm a little over, but I'll be delighted to go to the Slack channel.
Brilliant. And if anybody has any other questions for Dean, please do post them, and we'll copy those into the Slack channel as well, and you can see his answers there. So thank you very much, Dean.
Thank you.
So up next, we have Madhavi Sarabu, who's the VP of UX and Design at Jaggaer, who will be talking about Designed to Wow, transforming an organization. So I'd like to welcome Madhavi to the stage. Welcome.
Thank you, Dean. Hope you guys can hear me and see me okay. We had a little bit of technical difficulty at the beginning of this presentation. As Dean mentioned, I'm currently the VP of UX and Design at Jaggaer. And I'm here to share some of the learnings that I had from leading teams and transforming organizations from multiple companies over the last several years. Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about myself. Bad design is my kryptonite, and I think all of the UX designers here will agree, or anyone in the design field will agree, that UX designers are kind of like, doctors, right? Doctors make bad patients. That's what everyone says. And we are terrible users. We have a mental model, and we want that to be, how the products work. And every time I open a Costco gallon milk for folks in US, you'll see me screaming at the house. And every time I open a packaging, you'll also see me screaming at the house. So things like, why would like a light bulb, which is the most fragile thing, come in a little cardboard box, whereas a knife, which you can't do anything about it, will come in something that is so hard to open. Right. So these are so back in the day, I used to always come up with these design problems, like, why do they do this? Why do they do that? And then I realized it's also my superpower, because now I'm thinking about, how do I solve this problem? Right. And I think as UX designers and UX leaders, we have that superpower where we know intrinsically, like as soon as we see something, what is the problem with that, and how do you want to solve that? So 3 of my passions are design, of course, and then leadership, like leadership in general, leading UX teams in particular, as well as sharing my learning so that others, hopefully learn from the mistakes and don't repeat those. One thing I wanted to mention is that the difference between UX leadership and UX managers, there are several people who are managing other UX designers, managing larger teams. And there are other single, solo designers who wear multiple hats. But regardless of who you are, the area of influence for you is a whole lot bigger than your area of control. What I mean by that is you can influence people by how you do stuff, how you come across, how you collaborate with them? How do you partner with them, etc.? So think about your authority or your power not being limited to like, hey, this is the only thing that I can control, but it goes a whole lot bigger and more beyond than that. Let me see. Okay. The first thing I would say is we all need to start with building our brand. You probably heard this from several other people before, but it is truly important. I'm going to share my story. A few years ago, actually several years ago, I was really struggling as a solo designer on my team, and it's like, what is going on? No matter how hard I try, I'm not making a big dent, a big impact. And I reached out to one of my sales coworkers at the time, and he said, okay, did you build your brand? I'm like, what do you mean building my brand? I said, you got to build your brand. Even the best product needs marketing. So what are you doing to market yourself? And building a brand doesn't mean that I go and create a logo for myself or a design for myself. It's about who I am as a person, who I am as a designer, who I am as a leader, right? So you got to start with what is your why? Simon Sinek does this a lot. So what's your why? Why are you in this field? What motivates you? What drives you? You've got to be really, thoughtful about that and put that down on a piece of paper. Like, what is your why? And what do you want to accomplish in an organization? In order to transform an organization, and I use that term like very broadly, right? An organization could be an entire company. It could be a small design team. It could be a small product team too. So what do you want to do in that organization if you want to transform that? So you focus on all of the things that you can do as a person. And then you also need to figure out, how will you succeed? You gotta have your measurements for success. How can I make sure that I am succeeding in what I want to be? So all of these things are your brand. That's what makes you who you are and who you are as a leader, right? So mine, sharing again my journey through this process. So my mantra is designed to wow. So anything I do, I want to wow our users. I want to wow the organization as well that I'm in. So design to wow is my mantra. That's what I use in all of my, dealings with people around me. So much so that our customers come to me and say, "Hey, this is not wowing me. You go do something different. The UI or the UX that you built is not wowing me." So it become a thing now, thing of its own. So I use that fairly regularly and frequently in all of my talks. So that's my thing. And you got to figure out what is your why, what is your brand, and come up with like one sentence that explains it. That's easy to understand. And then now you got your brand. So what is your vision for where you want to be, right? So for the organization, for yourself personally, what is your vision? What do you want to accomplish? For me, I want to leave the organization in a better place than I started. Every single day, every single month, every single year that I'm at that organization, I want to make sure that we are moving forward, we are making progress, and we're leaving it in a better place. So you need to have a vision for where you want to go, where you want to take the organization, and also get alignment along the way from all the key stakeholders, right? So build your vision. You got to really focus on the why, the what, and the how you're going to get there in order to build the vision. And this is my personal vision. And when I go to an organization or a company, I make sure that that's the vision that we set for individual organizations as well. My vision, again, is to delight our users with great experiences, right? So you got to come up with your own vision statement that is a motivator for everyone on the team. People can align behind it, etc. So you start with the vision. And then you identify core themes of what you want to tackle when you start at an organization, or even if you have been there for a long time, what are the UX themes? The typical UX themes are like, simplicity, consistency, et cetera, easy to use, intuitive. We all know what those themes are. But pick those themes and then keep at them, right? So as you go along on the journey, you'll realize that, hey, consistency, you've made a big dent in consistency, so you move on to the next one. So first start the vision, and then identify your themes, and then slowly start on the path to executing on that vision. So there are three things work for me. How do you get from a vision to a plan to an execution, right? So these key three things are alignment within the organization, immersion. One of my core themes is like design's not a solo sport; it's a team sport. So how do you get others to buy into your vision? How do you make sure that others come on that journey or get on the train with you in order to get to your final destination, right? And then productize. Like anything needs a repeatable process, a repeatable product. So if you think about design as a product in itself, how do you productize design? Alignment is really key. The first thing I would say is don't swim against the tide. This is really hard, as you can imagine. So sometimes it's a riptide and you get sucked in, but don't swim against the tide. If you were to go for braces, for example, to a dentist, and the dentist said, "Yeah, you know what? None of these look right to you, to me. So let me just knock out all of the teeth and start from scratch." That wouldn't, I would probably just run from the dentist right there. So you got to figure out what the business goals are, what the outcomes are, and then align with those goals. Without alignment, we're not going to get a whole lot, farther than being in the same place. So that is very important. How do you get alignment? How do you know what the company wants out of your design team? How do you define success for your design organization? But more importantly, how does the company define success for the design organization? It is really important for us to know what's important for the company. Typically, they fall into like a bunch of buckets, right? Your customer retention, for SaaS companies, customer retention is a big deal. So we want to make sure the customers are happy, they're delighted, so that they're continuing to use our products. New customer acquisition. How do you get more customers to the table? How do you bring more prospects to the table? And then, of course, increased revenue is always at the top of the mind for any company. We're not working in charities. The companies are there to make money, and we're there to help them succeed. In addition to making it user friendly as well. Know also what is important for the product team. As UX designers and leaders, we do a lot with empathy for our users. We do user testing and all of that stuff, but we don't spend enough time understanding what is important, who our partners are, who our peers are in the company, and treat them with the same thing. And treat them as a user. What would you do? Understand their pain points. What are their pain points? If it's a product team, figure out what is important for them. Is it time to value? Is it time to market? Sometimes we may have to do things faster, so we release something fast to get in front of the door, right? So what are those things that are very important for the product team? What are the important things for the engineering team? So know your peers in the department, know your peers across the organizations. Like if it's a customer success team, go find out what is important for them. If it's a customer support team, go find out what is important for them. And building partnerships is key, right? So you got to understand their pain points and help them solve that. That's how you make a friend. And then product tripods. A lot of people have talked about product tripods. What happens if all the three legs of the tripod are perfectly balanced? You have you have a nice place to lay that vase or whatever. But if one of the legs is broken, then there's no way that product is stable. So product, engineering, and UX, these are the three legs of the tripod. We got to make sure that we're in alignment, moving at the same pace. Sometimes the product team is moving ahead and the UX team is moving behind. Sometimes the UX team is moving ahead and the product team is behind, or engineering team, right? But we got to stay in alignment throughout the process. And we introduced a whole bunch of different techniques to get there. And I'm going to share some of them with you now. The second thing I said is very important is immersion. So we start with educating what UX is and how we do stuff, etc. Right? So how many of you have talked about fonts and colors and kerning and this and that? That totally, outside of the UX designers, no one cares. Team or customer success team, you don't care the techniques they use to do what they do. You're more worried about the outcomes, right? So you gotta show them the outcome of doing what you do on a daily basis. Spend less time teaching them what kerning and font families and font weights are, and more time talking about the outcomes from a user perspective. Like, hey, if you use bigger font, then you'll get like more readability and things like that. So try to explain that. Don't talk about information architecture. Instead, talk about, what does information architecture do to your product. I use the example of a junk drawer all the time. Without information architecture, you get a junk drawer where people are, just dumping stuff in. You can't find anything in there. So use examples, use storytelling. Dean, who just spoke before me, was a wonderful storyteller. So you got to bring in personal examples, make it personal for them, and show them what that looks like and feels like. The first thing is, if you show, don't teach. That's my mantra. Show something, and they'll learn faster. And if you immerse them in the process, they will learn even faster, right? So think about you and me. How do we learn a language? We go do immersion in the country of origin, right? So that's the easiest way to learn a language. It's the same thing about UX design. So you got to immerse your peers and your other people that you work with in the journey, so it makes it a little bit easier for them to follow along. So I personally use design thinking as a framework. I don't follow it exactly to the T, but I use the design thinking framework of understanding, ideating, validating, and then producing. And that circle continues as we go through this journey, right? So how we execute on this framework is by using the a design jam is what I call it. It's a framework that we created over the last several years. It's a modified design sprint is what it is. So if you have read design sprint from Jake Knapp from Google Ventures, it's a 5-day process of understanding to testing, right? But in companies, typically getting a whole bunch of stakeholders in a room for 5 days straight, it's never going to happen. So I realized it early on that that's not something we can easily do. So I break it down into 3 2-hour sessions. Day 1 is understanding, and then you go along on the journey. And some of the steps of the design sprint are outside of the design jam. So this is a framework that is working really well, and you don't have to do these 3 sessions simultaneously, one day after the other. You can even break it down. So I would suggest like understanding the problem, really getting to the root of the problem. You could do a session on that, on week 1, and then you maybe ideate some solutions in week 2, etc. So I'm going to quickly share what we do for this design jam. The understand process, you need the stakeholders who truly understand the user problem, right? In some cases, you may bring in users. In other cases, you bring in the user representative, whether it is a product manager or a customer success manager or someone who's talking to the users all the time. You bring them in and you spend like a couple of hours understanding and mapping out that journey of that particular user, and then figuring out what do we want to solve for in the next 3 days. So what this means is that you got to do your groundwork before that. You got to identify your stakeholders, you identify a problem, and then you come to the meeting. And even before that meeting, you kind of present, what are we trying to do with this 3-day, 6-hour design jam. So this has been very successful for us. People get excited, and participation is key. So you identify people who can actually contribute to that. We spend day 2, and I'm using that term day 2 very loosely, right? As I said, you can do it in week 2 as well. Ideation. And when I said immersion in the design process, ideation is where managers and others can contribute very easily. Like, hey, we are trying to solve the security problem, like Dean mentioned a few minutes ago. So what are some of the ideas where we can make that a little bit better? So it's not just the UX designer's job, but everybody who's feeling this pain can help us solve that problem. So we get really creative about coming up with ideas. We look at competitors. We look at how others have solved this problem. And it's a really cool way to collaborate and come up with solutions together. And then day 3, we spend in creating a storyboard of sorts to figure out what kind of prototype do we want to build. And day 3 is literally setting up for a prototype building session. And then we build the prototype after the design jam and validate with users. So all of that stuff happens outside of this framework. So 6 hours, very well spent. You get a lot of collaboration and problem solving, brainstorming from these 3 sessions. So I highly recommend it. If you have any questions, reach out to me. More than happy to help out. And then I said productize. We as design leaders and designers, we need to have a repeatable process that we can use. It's kind of like pulling tools out of a tool belt, right? So if there's a problem X, there's a solution Y. So same thing we do with problems, we got to do with our design process too. So are you trying to solve a new problem? Is it an existing problem? Is it a new UI that you're creating? Or is it a addition to an existing one? All of these things kind of come together to build a process. Like mosaic, like tiles in a mosaic patterns. All of these things come together to make up a beautiful process, right? So you got to figure out what those templates are. How do you make sure that you're sharing that with outside stakeholders, etc. And then consistency, flexibility, and transparency are your 3 best friends. Whatever you do, be consistent with that. People need to know what to expect, how you solve the problems. All of that should be like fairly straightforward and easy to understand. Transparency. When I say transparency, it's not about just exposing your process to others. It's also about like, what are you working on right now? Different departments in the company need to know what you're working on. So it should be fairly easy to understand, easily available. And if someone asks you, hey, what are you doing? You should be able to tell them exactly what you're doing. It's not about like keeping track of what you're doing, but more importantly, it's sharing so that others can prepare for the next step of the journey. And then what is your roadmap? How are you? So at the beginning of this talk, I shared like, you have to show them a vision and a path to get there. So what's on your roadmap? What is coming up and how are you going to solve these problems? And all of these need to be like that golden thread that weaves through the entire product line, right? So what is your roadmap? How are you going to share that? Make sure that it is available in a shared document repository somewhere. A lot of people use Confluence, some people use other sources. So make sure that it is available for anyone in your company that wants to see it. And then who do you want to validate it is another thing. So you validate it with users, make sure that's available too. And I want to make sure that you're doing all of this stuff, but don't forget that design's fun, right? So this may seem like an uphill battle sometimes, and sometimes it is really hard and challenging, especially if you're starting out from scratch in a brand new design organization. It feels like a thankless job, but doing everything that you do every day is just going to build that excitement in the company. So one recommendation I have is don't start big. Don't start solving all problems for all people, right? So start small. Pick something that is really, really small and very valuable to the company. In my case, several years ago, again, the biggest pain point was that salespeople couldn't show upcoming ideas to prospects. So a simple thing, as simple as a prototype or a wireframe, was really a game changer for them. They could share that with customers or prospects and say, hey, this is what's coming up. And people were excited about that. So pick something that is very small, that is meaningful, that is impactful for the organization, and then start there. And guess what? Kind of like the great products, word of mouth, some other product manager or some other organization or department within your organization is going to realize, oh, wow, this is awesome. Let's repeat that. So your peers and your other stakeholders become your champions. That's how you scale design. I really strongly believe that as UX designers, our job is not to be designers, but design enablers, making sure that other folks in the organization are enabled and capable of identifying UX problems, and bringing them to the UX team's notice and attention. So with that, I have a few minutes for questions if they have any, but thank you to the UXDX team for having me. Rory, I can't see any of the chat, but let me know if you have any.
Will do. Thank you very much, Madhavi, for sharing those. I thought it was really comprehensive and really quite interesting. Although I feel a bit my drawer process as you were describing it. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions out there, please do post them in. But while we're waiting for people to kind of get warmed up and ask some questions, I had one because I really liked your kind of shortened design sprint that you had said, and that you were kind of able to move it around as well, not being rigidly stuck to days.
Yeah.
Do you still find it difficult to get the buy-in though? Like to get people, you were saying that one of the challenges is 5 days commitment is huge to ask for people.
Yep.
But do you find it challenging even to get like all those people together? I know when you're trying to kind of get everybody together, diaries can be very difficult. So how do you try to overcome that, and how do you convince people that it's worth their time to invest?
Yeah, so I think I'm getting to your point. I'm getting meetings on the calendar is the toughest challenge, right? So, but they see once you do this, you share, and that excitement kind of builds itself, and people want to come in and join you. So the first time is going to be absolutely difficult. So I would say plan for it ahead of time. We send out meeting invitations 2 weeks ahead with a PowerPoint presentation or just a quick, show of like, hey, here's what we're going to do. And then setting up that meeting for 2 hours on one day is a whole lot easier than blocking off like a whole week on someone's calendar. So it's a little easier. So 2 hours go by really fast, and we really get to the meat of the problem. Because sometimes understanding the problem is the step one, right? So we don't spend enough time in understanding the problem. We just quickly jump to solutions and start solutioning. So this takes us a step back, allows us to take a step back and focus on the problem and problems from multiple persona perspective. So story mapping could be a good exercise to do that. We could do that even before the design jam. So, you're not tackling like 15 personas with this design jam. And this is a very focused activity on solving one problem. So a good example that we've done multiple times is like creating landing pages, for example, is a very good activity to do with the multiple stakeholders, and they get excited about seeing what comes out of it. So planning, absolutely. And like I said, as designers, you got to be ready for that uphill battle sometimes. But once you push yourself through a little bit, the rest of the journey becomes a whole lot easier.
Brilliant. No, some great advice there. And just coming back right to the start. So but your why, like what is your why? Your why is kind of the wow. But how do you communicate that through the rest of the piece, and how do you kind of use that, your brand, as you said, during the rest of that process that you've kind of talked through, the align, immerse, and productize?
Yeah, so if I am there to design to wow and the company doesn't want to do that, I'm swimming up against the tide again, right? So you got to align your vision to what that wow is for individual organizations, right? So for example, for some of the companies, it may be like an immediate, like, hey, how do I get more wow feeling from our UI? For others, it may be like, oh, we have UX problems. Our UI is great. Like, I mean, it looks awesome, but you have UX problems. So individually, leaders and designers got to figure out what that wow is. And the wow is different from consumers to enterprise users, right? There's like this weird dichotomy between consumer apps and enterprise apps, even though same people use it in different settings. What is wow for consumers is like, oh, you can't tell me how to get from this department store in a mall to that one. What are you thinking? Whereas for enterprise users, it's like, if I can just figure out how to reset my password, that's a big deal. So I think all of that alignment and immersion, all of that stuff needs to go back to what is wow for that particular organization, and then start from there. So it's like a golden thread that connects all the dots between, right? So for me, the design jam is ultimately, okay, the prototype we come up with has to wow the users. So And when we validate, we ask them, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how awesome this is. And that's how we connect the dots.
Excellent. No, that's some fantastic advice. So I hope everybody out there has taken as much away from that as I have. So thank you once again, Madhavi.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our session for today. So if you did enjoy the talks, I hope you kind of enjoy the concept of what we're trying to build with UXDX, where we want to break down the barriers that exist between product UX design and dev to generate that product team. So at all of our conferences and events, we actually have speakers, developer speakers, product managers, everybody sharing about their different elements, because it's about how can you work better together as a team. Coming up in the USA in 3 weeks' time, which might be a bit short notice if anybody wanted to join us. But we also have an event in Dublin in October, where we'll have 50 speakers, 2,000 attendees, 12 workshops, and an infinite amount of experience. So if you're interested, please do consider coming to join us at that. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next UXDX Online. And I'd just like to finish by thanking both of our speakers for an amazing 2 talks this evening. And thank you to all of you